This is Teaching to the Test Pattern.
Hey buddy, welcome to StreamSemester.com's Teaching to the Test Pattern. I'm Tom White, your host, and today I'm going to cover something that plagued me when I was a video teacher in the classroom, and that is, was I a teacher or was I training the students? And I remember thinking that I couldn't understand why my students couldn't remember how to set up a tripod. I mean, tripods are essentially the same, and they would fight over these specific tripods, and if they didn't get the tripod they wanted, they would kind of pout, and I never could figure it out, and I didn't understand why something so simple could cause such consternation. But if you're not sure what I mean by teaching versus training, let me just run this by you. Are you teaching your students the tools and techniques needed to succeed, or are you just training them to simply follow your process? And something that I used to say regularly, and I look back now on my time in the classroom and kind of go, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. I used to say the process determines the product. And the problem with that is I was teaching them the process. So think about this. When something happens that isn't normal, your students typically like to film in the same places, but something happens and that place that they normally film isn't there. Do they shut down? If they can't get the interview they want, do they shut down? Do they just, I can't do this project? Is that what happens? Because if it is, then you might be training them instead of teaching them. So the difference is training, you're just basically saying, here's the process. Training, it happens in a factory. Training happens where the process is the only product is the process. Whereas teaching, you're teaching the students what to do when the process is disrupted. So instead of always having them film the same thing, or if they stumble, and they've been taught, they know how to get themselves up and get themselves out of a hole. If they don't shoot in the same place every time, they've learned how to get out of a hole versus just go shoot, edit, rinse, repeat. So here's how to change that. Here's how to, if you feel like you've become a trainer, here's how to stop that right now. The first thing you need to do is increase your basic training at the beginning of your day or the course or whatever. Don't just show the students how to use something. Show them why. Show them the different things about the device. For example, for a camera, I can put it in full auto, teach a kid to point the camera and hit record. I've just trained them, but I haven't taught them anything. So when it comes to cameras, how to change aperture, how to use manual focus, change the audio settings. Audio is the biggest thing that I see when it comes to training versus teaching. Students know that they're supposed to get audio and they plug up their headset or their microphone, and then they put in their headset and it makes noise and they're happy with it. But if it doesn't, what happens? Do they know the difference in line level and mic level? Do they know the difference in needing phantom power? Do they know how to set one channel to record an interview and another channel to record ambient sound? Teach them those things. Number 2, do not hold equipment. This is something that I see regularly and I hear regularly when I talk to teachers. If you have a section of your closet that is for beginning students and a section for intermediate students and a section for advanced students, more than likely, you're looking at your advanced students going, well, they're not as advanced as I thought they were at the beginning of the semester, because they're having to learn something new at every level. Teach them the first time, make them be responsible, make them learn the equipment. Don't baby them into, here's a full automatic. It's a $90 camera. It's going to capture pictures. It's going to capture sound. Don't do that. Seriously. Make your beginners advanced, because imagine how advanced your advanced kids will be 2 years, 3 years later, 4 years later in some cases, when they've had the same opportunities from day one. Number 3, teach that storytelling trumps technology. Too often students get used to or want to have the latest tools and go out and try to shoot the coolest shots and all of that, but their story sucks. No one's going to watch a bad story. If I can mute your news package and get just as much from it, or I can mute your feature and get just as much from it, then why would I watch it? Make sure that your students understand storytelling, beginning, middle, end, exposition, demonstrate, see what you say. So B-roll paired with good voiceover or B-roll paired with good vox pops, any of those things, make sure that they understand that storytelling trumps technology. The best camera in the world is not going to make the best movie in the world. And then actually teach editing technique versus editing technology. Far too often I see in contests and things that I get to judge that students have gone online, they've gone to YouTube or Video Copilot, and they've watched a tutorial, then they've mimicked that tutorial. Great, now they know how to do one thing. And yeah, they've learned some ancillary things, but they haven't learned the actual techniques on editing. Same thing with Premiere. They haven't learned a J-cut or an L-cut. They haven't learned those things. So teach them good editing technique and not just the technology. Fight the urge to create something new and create something great. Cool takes time, and great takes planning. So you can do great and cool at the same time. It just takes great amount of time and planning. Number 5, force your students to learn from obstacles. This is the biggest thing. Put them in uncomfortable positions. It's too easy to just click a button and move on to reach over and click a button. What I mean there is a student struggling, you just reach over and go, okay, here's how you do that. And you don't teach them. You don't let them fight their way through it. Don't be a lawnmower teacher. Don't mow down the grass for them. Let them fight through the weeds. Ask yourself after an interaction with a student, did they actually learn something? Or did I just do it for them? That's a big thing. And that was something I struggled with. You know, there are a lot of times where even still working with the college students, I'll ask a question. I'll go, oh, yeah, it's this. Oh, yeah, it's that. And not even tell them why. Just do that. I'm not helping them. I'm just moving on to try to get out of that situation. And then number 6, finally, put your students in uncomfortable situations. Make them film in areas they aren't comfortable. Make them interact with people they aren't familiar with. Just like when I talked with Bill Phelps last week and he was talking about the student who reached out and got the interviews. Put them in those situations. They are going to face those situations when they go to college or the career or whatever. They need to learn to talk to people they don't know and to talk to adults now while their job's not on the line, while they're not worried about making a paycheck or any of that stuff. Go ahead and teach them those things now. So if you do those things, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. You're going to get some negatives. Honestly, you're going to really kind of 3 things that you're going to experience. You're going to experience pushback within yourself because you feel like you've been teaching, but you've been training, so you're uncomfortable. And you don't want to be uncomfortable, and you don't want to put the kids in uncomfortable situations because now they're uncomfortable, which means they're going to complain. Their work's probably going to suffer a little bit because they're uncomfortable. And you want to release that pressure on yourself and your students, but don't. You know, we care about our kids. We don't want to see them struggle, but they need to struggle in order to grow. The next place you're going to feel pushback is from your students. Again, they don't want to be uncomfortable, and they'll do all they can to cut corners and avoid the stress. They'll do so much to avoid the stress that they just won't do the work. They'll argue with you, challenge you, all those things. Stand your ground. Not everything should be a fight. I'm not saying be in a constant fight with your students, but I am saying that you need to push back a good bit on some of these things and push them beyond where they think they can go. And finally, ultimately, you're going to get pushback from parents. The parents are going to hear about how stressful a project is. Grades may slip a little as the kid tries to avoid, challenges. But as I've said time and time again, you got to get out in front of it. You have to communicate with the parents early and often. Explain to them what's going on. Explain to them that little Johnny is just won't send an email to the principal in order to get an interview. That's it. Put the ball in little Johnny's court. You just have to communicate. You have to communicate with the parents ultimately. And then finally, you're going to know it's working. It's going to take time. In a best case scenario, they're going to become a beast. They're just going to run towards the uncomfortable because that's where the rewards really are. They're going to live outside of their comfort zone. They're going to be aggressive in those things, and you're going to see those results instantly, and it's going to be awesome. Another scenario, the student's going to recognize and present that recognition that they needed to push. It may come in an email. It may come in a conversation you overhear, a post-semester survey. If you don't do a survey at the end of the semester, you're missing out. Go to Google right now, create one, send it to your students, make it anonymous, tell them they can say whatever they want. You're a big boy or a big girl. But the student may do that. And, it may be months, weeks, years. You may have a kid come back later and tell you that they really appreciate it. I had that happen to me several years ago. A young man and I did not get along. He challenged my career a couple of times. I had to make a decision whether being right with him or eating and providing for my family, which lane I had to take. He emailed me many, many years after he graduated, and he told me, he goes, "You made a big difference in my life." And I was too big of a punk to see it then, and I totally appreciate it now. And that was years after he graduated. And then, you may never know. The third scenario, you may never know. You may never know. If you teach hundreds of kids a year, say you teach 100 kids a year, 5% get it immediately. 10%, takes, a month or two to get it. And then the rest, they may never realize it or they may never vocalize it. But understand that you're doing the right thing by putting them in uncomfortable situations and teaching them how to overcome those situations. And know this, that ultimately teaching leaves a lifelong impact on their students. But training, really, it's kind of like a dog. If you train your dog to do something and then you get out of that training, you don't force them to do what they've been trained to do, they're going to stop. And your students will do the same thing. So I highly encourage you to be a teacher. Focus on making sure that you're not looking only at the process, and go out and do great things and make awesome. Thank you so much for listening.
Teaching to the test pattern.